Good morning, everybody. Rick, the LinkedIn guy. I would tell you the story how that came about, but I only have 45 minutes. In fact, I'm going to start my timer so I don't run too late. But I did promise some of the people I was talking to prior to this morning's session, because they asked me a question that says you're going to have to wait until the presentation. So how many of you remember the game Jeopardy? Okay. I understand it's still going on. I'm doing a lot of speaking nowadays at some colleges, some campuses, and I'm speaking to a students, younger audience. And I have to be very careful about the analogies and the stories I'm telling, because some of them, they just don't get it. You know what I'm talking about. So now I have to check every time. I did one with a Rolodex once, and they looked at that and went, "What is that?" And when I told them, their comment was, "Man, that's rad." All right, so if you recall in Jeopardy, the object of the game was what? Come up with the right question. So I am going to give you the answer, and your job is to come up with the right question. I got a very exciting prize. You get it right. It's a one-way trip to Barstow. Anybody here from Barstow? No offense if you're from Barstow. All right, if you have seen me present before, you know the answer. Let somebody else win the trip to Barstow. All right, while they do that. Ready? So here we go. The answer is Mexico City. Capital of Mexico. That would be correct, but incorrect. No trip to Barstow. So most polluted city in the world. Probably true, but no trip. One more. Third largest city in the world. Okay, I don't know if that's true or not. The correct answer would have been, where are you from? Meaning, where am I from? Okay. Really? I was born and raised in Mexico. Of course, with a name like Itzkowicz and looking the way that I do, you could immediately tell that I was from Mexico, right? So who was it that asked me, I detect an accent, and where are you from? Okay, there was somebody. Yes, now you have the answer. Okay, and I start oftentimes my presentations, because if I don't, some people are wondering, I wonder where he's from. I wonder where he's from. And then they miss half the things that I'm saying. All right, so now you know. Born and raised Mexico City. I have Polish grandparents on one side, Russian on the other one. I moved to the U.S. when I was, 17, married a Swede, so I have my own United Nations going on at home. All right, there's some numbers here on the screen. What I want you to do is take a look at the numbers, and there's no right and wrong answer, so don't worry about that. Look at the numbers, and which one do you think is most different from the others, and why? Which of these numbers do you think is most different from the others? Yes, sir.
I thought one.
One. How many of you think one is most different by show of hands? Okay, and why is that?
It's the only number that can be multiplied by itself to come up with the same answer.
Very good. How many of you think that 13 is most different? Any 13s? Couple? And yes, why is that, ma'am?
Because the other ones have the number 1 in the name.
Okay. How about 31? How many think 31? Okay, that's about half the audience. The rest of you either are still wondering or you don't want to be wrong. All right. Look at the numbers again and tell me which of those numbers is the only even one. And you're going to go, Rick, there are no even numbers. Come on, some of you are college graduates. There's an even number there. So, yeah, some of you have already seen that, and it's the number 2. And this is where some of you are going to groan and go, oh man, you tricked me. Is it really a trick? Is it a number? 2? Is it even? Did you consider it? No. Why? Why didn't you see it?
Looking for something else.
Yes, but there's something specific that prevented you from seeing it. You got it. It's the parentheses. And what are parentheses used for? To stop you. Now, to separate. They're not necessarily designed to stop you. They're designed to separate. Yes, quick story on this. My oldest daughter, who is now 20 years old, she was in the first grade, so we talk about 14, 15 years ago. And I was doing this at home because people wanted to know what I did, and I tried to explain, says, let me give you a demo. And I was given this demo. My daughter says, I'd like to play. I go, sure. So I did this, and she immediately raised her hand. Remember, she's in the first grade, and she said that the most different number was the number 2. And I knew I was the father of a genius right then and there. So I asked my genius, I go, genius, why'd you pick number 2? She goes, because 1 and 3 are odd and 2 is even. Well, that's great. She says, what about these? She goes, those are not numbers. You got to remember, this is a 6-year-old, right? Those were words. Fast forward, about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, she's in high school. Do the same thing again, she's playing. She could no longer see the numerals because she had already been trained as to what C. Now, why do I do this? Because what if these were potential opportunities for you? Either business development opportunities, job opportunities for you, and you're looking at the pool of opportunities available, how many did you miss? 50% of them. And the fact is, we're all doing that. We have our preconceived notions, our blind spots, and we're missing opportunities. And what I have found is that when it comes to social media, LinkedIn, et cetera, many, especially the older demographics, we are missing a tremendous amount of opportunities. In fact, by a show of hands, how many of you have a LinkedIn account? Let's see, it should be most of you here. Is there anybody who doesn't, and it's okay if you don't? I'm just curious. There's a few people, that's okay if you don't, because the next question I'm going to ask is the great equalizer, okay, for those of you who say, oh man, I don't have one. Okay, so this is about true. About 90 to 95% of the audiences that I speak in front of have a LinkedIn account. Here's the next question. How many of you are making money with your LinkedIn account? Raise your hand. It's about 2-3% of the people who do that. You see, so if you don't have one, you're not missing much. All right, most people don't know what they're doing there. Hopefully that will change in the next 40 minutes by the time I'm done here so you can actually see the power behind that, which I believe most people really are not tapping into. They're missing because they don't understand it. I know I certainly didn't understand it when I first started using it, and most people still don't. All right, so today's agenda, what I'm going to be talking about is I'm going to be talking about the power of LinkedIn. I only have about 40 minutes or so, so I'm going to be giving you a 50,000-foot view. It's like a big overview so you can understand, wow, I had no idea that you could. That's my goal here today. I'm not going to give you a lot of tips and tactics regarding press here and do that because that wouldn't be nearly as helpful to you than understanding the possibilities. Okay? Towards the end, when I'm done, I'm going to be talking about a mentoring opportunity that I have for those of you who would like to go further and like to find out more about that. And then we'll have about a 10-minute Q&A period. And any time, if I don't answer your question, I'll hang around afterwards and I'll give you my contact information as well so I can answer those if I don't take them here. Okay? So just hold off to your questions until we get to the end because I may be covering that. All right, let me advance this. I'm going to turn you all into fisher people. You can't be fishermen because that is no longer politically correct, so you're all fisher people. And as fisher people, if this was the, whoops, what did I do? I pressed the wrong button. If this is the way that you're catching fish, and you wanted to double the number of fish that you're catching, how long do you suppose it would take you to catch twice as many fish with this method? Twice as long. Why? Not a very efficient way to catch fish, would you agree? What if you're catching fish like this? Would that be a little bit better? Yes. Especially if you go fishing where the fish are. That's really good advice if you're going to be in the fish business. Okay, it's because you can have the best tools, and if you go where the fish are not, it's not going to make any difference. I will tell you this. If you are in business today, or planning to go into business today, if you're a student, the fish are all on LinkedIn. In 2013, you are expected to have a LinkedIn presence. Just like you're expected to have a cell phone, just like you're expected to have an email, just like you're expected to have a website if you're a business. Okay? Now, many people have a LinkedIn profile, and unfortunately they have what I call a crappy LinkedIn profile. Now, I know people are saying, oh, he's talking about me. Not necessarily. And if you do, it's not your fault, because nobody has explained to you. But let me just put it this way. It's the equivalent of having a lousy website for your business. Do you think that might hurt you? It will hurt you more than not having one. And if you have a LinkedIn profile and it's really lousy, and my definition of lousy is you have no picture, you have nothing about you. Worse yet, you have a picture of you, your cat, your dog, your spouse, your kids. That's even worse. All right? So, no. Okay. I've been presenting all over the world. I've asked the following 3 questions all over the world, and it's always been unanimous for the audiences that I've presented to. And very few business owners, very few people who are in sales. And by the way, by a show of hands, how many of you are either business development, sales, or own your own business in here? The majority of you. Okay, how many of you are here because you're looking for a job? Let's see. Okay, a few of you. Great. And the rest of you, I'm assuming, if you're not an entrepreneur, if you don't own your own business, you're here because you're working for a company that does that. All right, so this portion primarily refers to the people who are in business development and or sales. And very few people who are in business development or sales are receiving 100% of their business from referrals and is sufficient for them to meet their financial goals. Is there anybody here who's receiving 100% of your business from referrals and is sufficient for you to meet your financial goals? Raise your hand if you are. One person out of over 100 people. You're very fortunate. What do you do? OD, what's that? Organization. Oh, to me, OD is when they die, you know. So I needed to qualify it. Just to check. Okay? One person out of over 100 people in the room who actually do that. Most people are not that fortunate to be able to do it. By the way, what brings you here?
I have a son who's a headhunter up in the Silicon Valley, and it's his primary tool.
Uh-huh.
So he talks about it a lot. And
You want to know why he talks about that?
well, I was on it for a while. I just got annoyed with it and dropped it this summer. Almost like Facebook. It was just like too much.
So you got back here to get annoyed again? You don't mind me playing with you a little bit?
Well, not really.
Okay.
No, I'm not that open to it. But
I get it. I get it. And frankly, you really don't need it.
But I need to be able to talk to my son.
Oh, to your son. Okay, got it. Okay, great. Always have to find out. I don't know what your purpose for being here is, all right? But let's assume for a second that, those of you who are entrepreneurs and you're not as fortunate as this gentleman, by the way, you are the second person when I've asked this question that gets 100% of their business from referrals and it's sufficient. Most of us, even though we get a lot of our business from referrals, which is great, it's not sufficient, which means we have to do what? Prospect. Okay, so I'm going to share with you 3 methods of prospecting. You tell me which of these 3 would you rather have. Okay, and so far it's been unanimous overall in all the audiences all over the world. Cold calls. Anybody here loves making them? Not a lot of hands go up. There's usually 1 or 2 that people say, well, I don't mind. All right. What about door-to-door sales? Anybody here loves those? No? You're fine with it, but you don't love them, okay? You're fine with cold calls too. As I said, there's always 1 or 2 people who they're fine. Some people actually like them. They're weird, but they actually like them. How about a personal introduction? How many of you, by a show of hands, would rather do that? Still the majority. Why?
It's a quicker way to connecting with the prospect.
It's a quicker way, yes. What else? You're indoors. Who said that? Over here. Yes. There's a little bit, which makes what?
Comfort level.
The comfort level and what else? The trust, the credibility. Absolutely. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the secret behind LinkedIn. Is that if you would like to connect with people you would like to meet, you'll never have to make a cold call ever again. Now, this is usually the time in the presentation where I grab some people's attention. They don't believe me, but says, well, I'm interested, because I need to do that. I have recently become associated with an organization called Vistage International. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Vistage International. Vistage is the world's leading CEO organization in the world with about 17,000 CEOs worldwide. And I'm one of their chairs here in San Diego. I'm putting together a group. And I was shocked to find out that Vistage uses cold calling as a primary tool for building the groups. 70% of the people who join Vistage as CEOs come from cold calling. And I told him, you guys are nuts. He says, that's crazy. It's hard work. He says, Rick, we understand, and one of the reasons we're interested in you is because we'd love for you to prove that you can actually do something with LinkedIn so that you can train other chairs in doing that. I go, that's great. Because cold calling is hard work. Believe it or not, some people still don't get that we're in the 21st century. They define themselves as old school. I'm old school, and I'm proud of it. I was in Dubai a few years back. A gentleman walks up to me prior to my presentation and goes, Rick, nice to meet you. I go, nice to meet you. He says, I'm not sure how much I'm going to get from your presentation. I go, people normally wait a few minutes before they feel that way into the presentation. Not before. And why is that? He goes, I don't even own a computer. And I looked at him and I go, he was a young guy. He wasn't 45, 50 years old. He's just, can't believe I'm thinking those are young guys now. I remember when those were ancient people. Some of the students are looking at me. They are ancient people. Yeah, but your perspective changes when you get to be my age. All right, so I looked at him and says, you know, are you in business? And he goes, yeah. I go, what do you do? I'm in real estate. And I go, how you doing? He says, really well. I go, wow. And by the way, before you go Dubai, third world country, etc., there's nothing third world about Dubai. Okay? So some people will tell you that in the 21st century, face-to-face networking is dead. And that is absolutely incorrect. How many of you would attribute some percentage of your success to networking? Anybody here would do that? Most of the hands go up. So face-to-face is not going away anytime soon. However, unless you add an online component, you are really going to be putting yourself behind the 8 ball. Tying your arm behind your back and pretend that you're swinging a golf club. You can still hit it, but it won't go nearly as far nor as straight than if you're using both arms. So the synergies between the two is what I tell people. Once you do that, you'll never have to make a cold call again. And that really is the power of LinkedIn. Now, most people, when they haven't heard about LinkedIn and then trying to explain it to other people, they tell, you know, LinkedIn is kind of like Facebook for business. How many of you have heard that? That is absolutely incorrect. Okay, LinkedIn gets put into social media because they have nowhere else to put it. There's no category to put it. But if you're going to compare LinkedIn to something, you're going to be far more accurate in comparing it to a chamber of commerce than you would to Facebook. Now, how many of you have participated or attended events as part of a chamber of commerce? I guess a lot of you here would have. And how do you become successful if you participate at the chambers? Participate, networking, get to know people. What else? Didn't hear you. Help other people, absolutely. Give. Build relationships. That's the same principle that you need to do on LinkedIn. Most people go, hey, Rick, how do I post this on LinkedIn? I can't wait to get posted. They got the wrong idea. There's 3 critical success factors to LinkedIn. Your profile is 1, your network is 2, and your activities are 3. Of the 3, your activities are the least important. It's kind of like the icing on the cake. Work on your profile and your network first. In fact, I will tell you, I hardly ever post anything. I'm going to post something later on today that I was doing a presentation here. Why? Because it will add to my credibility. And I'll talk about the 2 currencies that you need to accumulate on LinkedIn. Okay. This is an example of, in one day I received 24 referrals. How many of you would love to get 24 referrals to your business in one day? Anybody here? It's pretty good. I did it all through LinkedIn. By the way, it took me about 2 hours to do this. It's pretty good ROE, return on event. Okay, most people go to networking events 2 to 3 hours, and they're lucky if they get 1. This is the possibilities if you know what you're doing with LinkedIn. Okay, so let's say you're thinking about using LinkedIn, and many of you are worried because you have no idea where to start. How many of you are in that boat? Okay, some of you know, but it just seems way too complicated. Anybody here feels that way? Okay, how about here? You're a face-to-face kind of person. You just are not a computer person. Anybody here falls in that boat? No? Few? And this is the biggie. You're worried about all the time that it takes. Yes? How many of you, at least one of these is a concern? Okay? But what if, by the time I was done here, not only do you understand what LinkedIn is all about, but you get a step-by-step formula that anybody can follow? Would that be of interest to you? Cool. So as I look around and see some of your happy, smiling faces, you're going to be happier and smilier because you're going to get that. Okay, when it comes to networking, there's 3 critical success factors to succeed. Number 1, you need a structure. Number 2, you need a process. Number 3, you need the right mindset. Okay, I'm going to talk about the 3 as they relate to LinkedIn, but this is for any kind of networking. I spoke briefly about a chamber of commerce. Okay, the chamber of commerce is a structure. Does it guarantee any business? No. Why? Because it's just a container. What you need to do when you are in the chamber to be successful is you need to have a process, something that you do repeatedly that is effective. Same thing on LinkedIn. You need to do that. Now, there's very ineffective processes that people use, and some of you will recognize the person I'm about to describe to you if you've been to enough networking events. This is a person that I call the Las Vegas dealer. Las Vegas dealer is the person who actually walks into a networking event. They have a stack of cards in their hands, and they're walking around and they're dealing. They're handing out anybody ever met a Las Vegas dealer at an event? We all have. And what do you typically do with that person's cards? Why? You don't know him. Don't trust him. Why? Because how are they coming across? Self-centered. Yeah. They don't have the proper mindset. Their idea is they're playing a numbers game. You're a number to them. They figure if they hand enough cards to enough people, somebody's going to want what they're selling. On LinkedIn, you'll find out many of the same people. They will connect with you, and the next thing they'll do, they'll be vomiting all over you. Hey, nice to meet you. Buy my stuff. I'm the greatest, and doing that, which might have been one of the reasons why you got it fed up with LinkedIn, as many people actually start doing that.
That was the bombardment.
What's that? It's the bombardment. Yeah. So doesn't mean that they're bad people. They just don't get it. They don't have the right mindset. So let's talk about those three as it relates to LinkedIn. First question is, why should I bother with LinkedIn? What's the big deal out of LinkedIn? Well, for starters, there's 225 million reasons. And that number is growing. That's the number of people that are on LinkedIn. And that number is growing at a rate of 2 new users per second. That's a lot of people that are joining. And you might say, Rick, so what? Facebook has about 1 billion people. Twitter has about 500 million. So what? But look at these demographics. And you tell me whether you're looking to sell something or you're looking to connect with people, you're looking to get hired, if that's a demographic that you might be interested in connecting with. The average adjusted household income of the people on LinkedIn is $109,000. By the way, these are 2010 or 2011 statistics, so this is probably already higher than it was. Also, 45% of the people are either decision makers or influencers. How many of you would like to connect with those people? What you have is people who make decisions who have money. That's a very high, it's also highly educated demographic. 2/3 of the people on LinkedIn have a bachelor's degree, a third has an advanced degree. 56% of the people on LinkedIn are outside of the US, especially if you're doing business internationally. Okay, so it's a global network and it's a highly, highly desirable targeted demographic. You can find all kinds of people on LinkedIn. For example, how many of you are alumni here from USD? Okay. One of the things that's great, especially if you're looking for a job, tap the alumni network. Why? Because you already have something in common with them. It's like being a member of the same fraternity, same sorority, and doing that, so you can find out. Oftentimes there's a level of trust that actually is inherent as part of that immediately. All things being equal, 2 candidates, one is an alumnus and the other one is not, chances are the one that is will get a much more higher, preferential treatment because there's a common bond. So that's one of the things that you can do that with. Those of you who are looking for jobs, again, this was in 2010. 92% of the hiring managers were using social media, 86% were using LinkedIn. That number has actually probably gone up. As the gentleman said, his son is a recruiter and he uses it all the time. I've recently interviewed about 4 or 5 different recruiters. All of them, the first place they go to is LinkedIn. Okay, so if you're looking for a job, you need to be on LinkedIn. By the way, they told me a few other things that I didn't know about this, and that's if you post a resume in Monster.com and all of those places, some of the companies that are advertising for jobs have already filled those jobs. By the time they post that job, they're just trying to be compliant so they don't get sued. There's an informal network that gets about 70% of the jobs that are out there that never get publicized. So if you're looking for a job, you need to use your network. You need to be networking because otherwise, if you just go through regular channels, send your resume, and there's a stack, but this big, and yours is going to go all the way to the bottom. So you need to stand out. People are looking for your products and services. Now, this was a feature that was available on LinkedIn up until about 2 years ago. It's no longer available, but I left it there because it still underscores the principle. And if you read that, it says, can you recommend a CPA, a dentist, a payroll attorney, etc.? Why would people be posting these type of questions, asking recommendations from these professionals? Any ideas? Trust, yes, and one other thing. Time. How many of you have purchased or hired someone on the basis of a recommendation from someone you know or trust? All of us have. Did that save you time? You bet. Is that one of the currencies that we have very little of today? You bet. So people are looking for you, not necessarily by name, but for what you do. A few years back, I received a request from somebody, hey, I'm looking for a female CPA in San Diego. It's a pretty specific request. I happen to know a female CPA in San Diego. I said, hey, you need to go ahead. Somebody's requesting you on LinkedIn. Says, well, I haven't gotten around to doing that. Says, you need to do that. By the time she did, that person had already found somebody. By the way, we do live in a time where people want what they want when? Yesterday. Yep. So you have to be part of the conversation. How many of you are familiar with the 6 degrees of separation? Okay, some of the college students tell me, well, I don't know that, but I've heard about the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. When I ask, where does this come from? They go, the Kevin Bacon? The movie? No. Actually, it was in the 1950s. A gentleman by the name of Stanley Milgram did some experiments. One of them was he was sending letters, parcels to people in large cities without having an address, simply having the name and the city. And the idea was, would people know people who would know people who would know that person? And interestingly enough, in about a third of the cases, the actual number was 29%. The letters were delivered to the right people. And the average number of people that it went to was 6. So that's the theory. LinkedIn works on something similar. Instead of being 6, there's only 3. So there's you over here, and then there are the people that are your connections, your first-degree connections. And that's nice, but that's not really that useful. So if you have X number of connections, the power of LinkedIn is not in the connections that you have. The power in LinkedIn is when you go to the second degree or the connections of those connections. I showed you that I received 24 referrals, and these, by the way, were 24 referrals to local CEOs here in San Diego in one day. None of those were people that I was connected to. All of those were people that the people I was connected to introduced me to. You guys get that? So it's not about who you're connected, it's about who they are connected. And then building the relationship so they can connect you to those people, introduce you to those people. And that's the power. There's one more layer, which is the third-degree connections. For all intents and purposes, disregard that. I've been keeping track of introductions at those 2 levels. At the third degree, they're happening between 3 and 7% of the time. The second degree, they're happening between 40 and 60% of the time. Let's just call it 50% as an average. How many of you would take that over cold calls? Anybody would take 50% over cold calls? You bet. And that, by the way, has been exactly about the number that I've received. I've received about 156 introductions. I've connected with about 83. And I've had appointments with 25 to date. I'll take those numbers any day against anything else that you're doing to be able to do that. All right, and if I were to summarize LinkedIn into one concept, one sentence alone is this. You don't know who all the people that you know. You don't know who all the people that you know. I can assure you that some of the people you would like to meet are probably known to some of the people that you know. However, they don't know you want to meet them, and you don't know they know them. There's a disconnect there. There's some invisibility. Quick story on this. My ex-wife and I were out to dinner with 2 other couples. A few years back, I was checking out. We were catching up what we were doing. I told them I was looking to meet somebody here in San Diego. I figured they might know because they're very connected here in the community in San Diego. And they said, sorry, Rick, don't know him. And then my wife looked at me and said, did you just say such and such? I go, yeah, why? She goes, because I know him. And you need to understand, she was not in the workplace at the time. So I looked at her and I go, how do you know him? Which might have contributed to me being an ex-husband, but that's a different conversation. So it's just because my girlfriend is dating him. Well, in for a penny, in for a pound. I figured, well, if you know him, why didn't you tell me? And what do you suppose her response was? You didn't ask. And why didn't I ask? Because it never occurred to me. I didn't know. And then I got to thinking, how do I know who she knows? Let alone, how do I know who all the people, those people know? And that's when it hit me. That's the power of LinkedIn. Okay? All right, the LinkedIn process starts out with questions. When? How much time? Rick, I'm too busy already. I understand that. We're all busy people. Okay? This is going to shock some of you how little time it actually takes once you know what you're doing. And I tell people, if you're willing to invest between 30 and 45 minutes per week, and you know what you do and you can get results out of LinkedIn. My coaching students actually do that, and they can do that. By the way, this can also be chunked down into 10 and 15-minute intervals, 2 or 3 days a week. Now, I don't know about you, but if you are so productive and so efficient and so effective with your day that you don't have 10 or 15 minutes, 2 or 3 days a week, I want to meet with you to find out what you're doing. By the way, there's no real-time activity you need to do on LinkedIn. So you can do this early in the day, late at night, whenever it is. It's not going to interfere with anything that you do. But the caveat here is you need to know what you're doing. It's very easy to waste 30 to 45 minutes on LinkedIn, especially because it's a horrible interface. It was designed by engineers. No disrespect to any engineer in the room, except any engineers in the room? Okay, no disrespect, you guys are great, except you see the world very differently. Very differently. There used to be a feature on LinkedIn called questions, that you could ask questions like I showed you. There was no tab for questions on LinkedIn. Guess where it was found? Under answers. I guess they figure you can't have an answer unless you have a question, so let's stick it there. I swear, I'm not kidding you. I once spent about 2 hours trying to figure out what these questions were because I couldn't find them. All right. You need to be very strategic when you're using LinkedIn. There's only 2 reasons why anybody would want to be on LinkedIn. And they are because A, you want to find business people. Anybody can guess what the second reason is. You want to be found by them. Okay? If you don't want to find or be found by business people, there's no reason for you to be on LinkedIn. But if you do, you absolutely need to be there because you're expected to be there. And failure to be on LinkedIn today is going to convey one of 3 things to people, none of them good. One of them is you don't get it, you're obsolete, you got something to hide, or you don't care. None of those things are things you want to be conveying if you're in business today. What can you find on LinkedIn? Well, you can find people by their title. Let's say you want to find CFOs. I'm currently looking for CEOs. You can actually do C-level searches, HR managers, okay, VPs. Instead of whoever's going to hire you, by the way, if you're looking for a job, you can find out who is the title, who is the name of the person, and you can find out. I'll tell you another thing that you can do that's pretty powerful. You can find people who are specific power partners. Power partners are the people who know the people you want to connect with, not necessarily the end users. So for example, one of my clients, she is a wedding photographer, and her ideal client are brides. I said to her, you're not going to find any brides on LinkedIn. Not that there aren't any brides on LinkedIn, however, they're not identified as such, so you won't find them. So she said, I guess LinkedIn is not going to help me. I says, no, what you'll need to do on LinkedIn is connect with other businesses that cater to brides, such as wedding planners, event coordinators, florists, caterers, because they know a lot of brides, and if you build a relationship with them, they can introduce you to them. Make sense? So you can actually do that for yourself. If you're going B2C and you're going to the consumer, you may not find the consumer on LinkedIn, meaning identifying, but you can partner up strategically with other people who do and get introduced to them. You can actually go into specific industries. Let's say you wanted to get into the medical industry for whatever reason, either to sell something or to work something. You can do a search for medical companies in a particular location. By the way, LinkedIn gives you the search capabilities of doing a search within a 10-mile radius of any zip code in the US. So I did a search for companies that had their headquarters only in the medical field in the greater San Diego area, and I found 21 companies when I did the search. You can say, Rick, I can buy a list that gives me that. Yes, you could, but that list won't tell you this. Who in my network already works at those companies? See, I can find out who in my network works at those companies and as such request an introduction. And I don't care if that person works in the mailroom and I want to get to the boardroom, that person has a boss. They can introduce me to their boss. If that person has a boss, they can introduce me to their boss, and I can network myself all the way up if I know what I'm doing and if I have the right mindset, which I'll talk about in a moment. You can find specific individuals. Brian Vogelson. Brian in the room by any chance? One of these days I'm going to meet Brian. Huh? You know Brian, somebody knows. See? If I wanted to get introduced to Brian, I could go to you. But there was no way for me to know that. Well, this is, what happened was, years ago, actually, somebody wanted to meet Brian. Well, I don't know Brian, but I went to LinkedIn, I did a search, And he came up with a number 2 by his name. Anybody knows what that means? Which means what? Means we have a mutual connection. I may know the connection, he may know that person or not, but we actually have a mutual connection. Well, I was just starting to use LinkedIn. I said, I wonder if he's on LinkedIn. I found him, and then I found that we had 2 people in common. I know both of those individuals. I sent an email to one, hey, by the way, I see you're connected to this guy. One of my colleagues would like to meet him. Would you mind facilitating an introduction? He said, I'll be delighted to do that. He did that, and they put the 2 of them together, and that worked out great. By the way, how long did it take me to do this, do you suppose? 5. Not even 5. Yep. And what did I gain out of this?
You got some capital there.
What was that?
Capital like you.
Social capital. Another word for that is goodwill. Exactly. That's one of the 2 currencies you need to accumulate on LinkedIn to be successful is goodwill. The other one is trust and credibility. Very powerful. All right, there's 3 ways you're going to get found on LinkedIn. The first one is when people search directly for you. Here's a suggestion. If you have a business card, the name on your business card should match exactly the name on your LinkedIn profile. If you're Susan, you shouldn't be Susie. Okay? If you're Susie, you shouldn't be Susan. Should match whatever it is that you have. If you're using your maiden name, use it in both. If you use your married name, use it in both. Whatever you have in your card. Why? Because many people will search for you using your business card and want to connect with you, make it easy for them to find you. The second way is when the LinkedIn search engine will find you. People will search for what you do. Insurance, chiropractic, real estate. So you want to be found by the keyword searches. And the third and the most powerful way is when people actually direct other people to you. That's a third-party endorsement, which is very powerful because of the implied credibility that we discussed.
That's one question, if you don't mind, and that is endorsing. I find people are.
Okay, just hold that question. The endorsement feature, by the way, for those of you who are dying to ask that question, is totally worthless. Good. Now you can continue listening to the presentation. All right? And don't get mad at me. I don't understand why people are endorsing me. You know, they don't know me. They're dead. You know, I've heard that. Somebody endorsed me and they were dead. They came back from the death to endorse me. Whatever it is, it's worthless. I won't even go into that. Recommendations, on the other hand, are priceless. There's a difference between a recommendation and endorsement, and the recommendations are priceless, endorsements are worthless. All right, the importance of the proper mindset, that really is key. It's all about adding value to your network. It's not about what you're going to get. It's how can you become more valuable to your network. It's about helping others, facilitating introductions, sharing useful content, etc. Building that social capital, that goodwill. The more you do that, the more people will go out of their way to do that for you. I am a connector. I'm very well connected. I know a lot of people. I have a lot of relationships, and I'm constantly putting people together. Why? Because I've learned that the more that I help others, whenever I need help, people will go out of their way to help me. And that really makes it very simple to do when you know how to use LinkedIn. All right, so how do you make LinkedIn work? There's 2 animals. They both need to feed themselves. Given what I've been sharing with you, you tell me which do you think would be more successful on LinkedIn. There's the cheetah that hunts, and there's the spider that attracts. How many of you think the spider would be more successful? How many of you think the cheetah would be more successful? Well, you have a 50-50 chance, so that's it. How many of you are not going to raise your hand no matter what I ask here today? Okay. The spider. It's much more about attracting than hunting. Okay, when you're hunting, you're going to get this. You might be just like the Las Vegas dealer, but when you're attracting, you're going to be far more successful. It's a totally different mindset. It's much more akin to farming than hunting. It takes time. You have to build the infrastructure, and it's about building relationships. Relationships are not built overnight. You have to do that. You have to cultivate them. And that leads me to this concept, which is probably the most powerful concept I've ever heard when it comes to networking. That's the VCP process. It's a trademark of an organization called the Referral Institute. And they teach people how to generate referrals for life. Powerful stuff. And the VCP is an acronym that stands for the following. The V stands for visibility, meaning people need to know who you are. It stands to reason. If people don't know who you are, they won't hire you, they won't refer business to you, etc. Yes? But it's not enough to have visibility. By the way, how many of you remember the cost of a 30-second spot at the last Super Bowl? $3 million. What were those companies purchasing? Visibility. Yeah. Most of us don't have that kind of cash to do that, so we have to find other ways to be visible. In fact, several people came up to me today and says, "You're the speaker today." I go, "How'd you know?" "Oh, I read about you, I saw the whatever it is," meaning I already have some visibility with them, which is good. That's in a day and age where there's thousands of people who do what we do. Okay, we need to stand out, so visibility is the first stage. The next step is C, which stands for credibility. Just because you have visibility doesn't mean you have credibility. Okay? And credibility comes in two dimensions. One of them is you know what you're doing in your field. You're good at selling insurance, you're good doctor, you're good headhunter, you're good whatever it is. The second one has to do with credibility as far as character. You're a decent person, you're good. And that comes in much more into play when people are thinking of referring you. If people know that you're good, but they don't trust you in terms of your character, probably they may use you if they need to, but they won't necessarily refer you, so you need both. If you have V and you have C, then you can start enjoying P, and P stands for profitability. This is a linear process. You cannot go from V to P without going through C. In fact, one of the mistakes that people make is they want to go, let me go back. They want to go from I, which stands for invisibility, to profitability without going through those stages. That's the Las Vegas dealer. So,
do you ask for recommendations or do you attract them?
you're asking questions before you're ready, sir. I know you can help yourself, but that's okay. I'll answer that one. You can do both. You know, I have found that the best way to get recommendations is to give them first. Oftentimes people want to reciprocate. But yes. However, if you're going to ask for a recommendation, here's Rick's rule for asking for recommendations. Only ask for a recommendation from someone you're certain they're going to give it to you. If you're not certain, don't ask, because you're going to be putting them in a difficult position perhaps, and it's going to ruin your credibility. All right, so in summary, what do we have with LinkedIn? We have a great platform. We got a great structure with fabulous demographics, people looking for your products and services, and you don't know who they know. The process, it's all about building relationships, 30 to 45 minutes per week to find and be found. In the mindset, it's all about attracting versus hunting in the VCP. How many of you now see some opportunity you didn't see before on LinkedIn? Anybody here? How you doing, sir? You still skeptical?
So I snoring?
No, I was just checking in on you because I always like to check with my skeptics.
I would not get back into it.
Okay, so he's still skeptical. That's okay. My goal is not to convert him. I couldn't care less. I was just checking, you know, whether he does that or not. Can you at least talk to your son?
Occasionally.
Okay, good. Well, that's a different problem. There's probably some other people. No, just kidding. All right. So in the infamous words, well, it's not so infamous, yes. As I'm nearing down the end of my presentation, there's really one more issue, and that has to do with our motivation. We understand the concepts, yes, they're not that hard to understand. I mean, there's nothing here that was rocket science, but you know what? There's some concepts, there's some principles. We may even understand how to implement it, but if you're like most people, you'll either hesitate to get started, or worse yet, you'll start and stop. Anybody here ever does that? By the way, you are prime season right now to wait until after the first of the year. You ever notice that September rolls around and you start hearing that? How many of you are already hearing that in your businesses? Call me after the first of the year. That's right. So some of you are going to wait as if something magical is going to happen after the first of the year, which is nothing. All right? So in the infamous words of Dennis Hopper in the movie Speed, what you going to do, hotshot? What are you going to do? I have no idea, but you're going to do one of three things. Guaranteed. Some of you are going to do absolutely nothing. You know, "Oh, that was nice, that was interesting," and do absolutely nothing. If you do, you're going to be missing a lot of opportunities. Some of you are going to go do this yourself, which if you do, all the power to you. You just be prepared to invest and waste a lot of time like I did. And some of you are going to let somebody guide you, which I hope it will be me, in case you want to pursue this further. I'm going to give you a demo regarding if you want to do this yourself versus getting guided. This next slide, what I have is I have 60 numbers, totally at random. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to find the numbers in the right sequence, meaning find as many numbers in the right order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nobody is going to find 0 because I have highlighted 1 and 2. So all of you will find 1 and 2 at least. But see how far you get to in 10 seconds. Ready? Go. Okay, anybody here got past 10? How far did you get to, sir? 15? You're on your way to Barstow. All right, we'll find out. Somebody can, exciting. All right, it looks like this is totally random and chaotic, yes? It's not. I'm going to show you a couple of patterns. We're going to do it again, and my guess is most of you will be able to get a lot further the second time we do that. And what you'll want to do is divide the numbers into fourths. Vertical line down the middle, horizontal line down the middle, into fourths. And then the numbers are arranged in a Z pattern, from left to right, down, and across. Okay? So down the quarters, and then move around the different quadrants, and you'll find the numbers in the right sequence. All right, we're going to go back, and we're going to do it again. Ready? Go. Okay, how many of you got further this time around? Most people did. Why? You found the pattern, you know where to look for. You saw something that wasn't visible. That's the difference when you get guided versus when you don't. All right, I have about 10 minutes for questions, which is what it is. So I'll take a few questions and I'm going to wrap up with an offer that I have if any of you would like to learn anything more about what it is that I do. But what are some of the questions? And I believe we have a microphone, so make sure that we can hear you also for the tape. So Gina, can you give me a hand and just see if people raise their hands, see if they can use it? Any questions? We have a gentleman in the back. You wouldn't mind getting that to him?
Probably don't need it.
Yeah, but you know what? It's for the tape, because it's being taped, so we'll need it for that. Thank you.
Question concerning recommendations. LinkedIn will automatically put your last 2 recommendations as the visible ones on your profile, and there's no way you can reorder them to change that. At least I couldn't figure it out. So if you get a new recommendation that isn't as, say, reads as well as some other ones, is it better to display it and say you have more recommendations, or just go with the 2?
Between you and me, ignore them. They won't hurt you as much. They won't help you. But if you don't want to, don't display them. If they're not relevant, why bother? Okay? Don't waste your time with recommendations. They're really... LinkedIn put the recommendations for LinkedIn's purposes, not yours or mine. You talk about... no, I'm talking about endorsements. I'm sorry. You talk about...
The recommendation.
Okay, the recommendations, you have to make them visible.
So if you have 7, have all 7 visible, even though the last one is not the best of all of them, and it's going to show first on your profile.
You know what? Anybody who's going to look at you is going to scan them anyway. So, yes. Now, if you don't like it, you can request for them to change it. Okay, and I've done that for people. It says, I really appreciate you taking the time to recommend me. Okay, would you mind, I know you said this to me, would you mind writing this into your recommendation? It would be really helpful if you did. Any other questions? Yes, in the back.
I get a lot of endorsements from people, and I'm in public relations and marketing, and then I know they want me to endorse them. But like a lot of people will put things on
Okay.
their profile that I don't want to endorse them for because they're not a PR person or they're not a marketing person, but I feel guilty because they've endorsed me.
Okay.
How do you, and these are people.
Well, I can't do anything about your guilt. That you're going to have to go somewhere else. Okay? You'll have to take care of your own guilt. You're not required to endorse them back. Okay? So, no, I'm telling you, for the most part, endorsements are useless. Okay, so I wouldn't waste any time. If you want to endorse them and you want to do it, great. You'll generate a little bit of goodwill. Only endorse them for the things you feel good about endorsing them for. Yes. I really don't want to talk about endorsements anymore. All right, I know you guys are dying because it is. It's not something that you should be concerned with. It's not going to benefit you much. Yes?
How do you set boundaries about whom you're going to allow into your network and who you're going to just blow off?
Well, if you accept them, you let them in. If you don't, you don't. So the question is, who do you accept and who you don't? Okay? What's your fear of accepting somebody that you don't know?
That someone will think that they'll call me and I'll go, I have no clue who this person is.
Okay?
Because I thought maybe they could help me.
All right. That's a very good concern that people have. It's number one question I typically get after endorsements, because everybody wants to know about endorsements. All right, and that is, should you connect with people that you don't know? Okay, so let me ask you a question. Would you go to a networking event and talk to somebody that is a stranger?
Yes.
Why?
Because you don't know who they may know.
How is that different from somebody wanting to connect you and you don't know who they may know?
Somebody might call me and ask me, so what do you know about Joe?
Nothing. Somebody's seeing you talking to them and says, what do you know about them? Sorry, nothing, I just met them. What's the difference? All right, it's just, by the way, I am not saying you need to or not. It's your choice. Okay? Most people don't want to connect with people they don't know because they're afraid of something, and most of the things they're afraid of are totally invalid because they don't understand how LinkedIn works. Yes?
Oh, good morning, Rick. My primary position is in education management, but I've recently gone into a secondary type of business. Obviously, you don't want to create two different profiles with your same name. How would you handle diverse focuses?
Great question. Yes. You do not want to create more than one profile for two reasons. First one is you're violating LinkedIn's terms of service. They can kick you out. I'm not saying that they will, but they could. Secondly, and more importantly, is because you're going to be confusing people. Okay? So you want one profile, and there's a way that you can actually weave those two, especially if they're related to one another, in your summary. And that's where I would do that. Okay? Yes. Anything else? Any other questions?
Do you recommend premium versus standard and the differences?
For 90% of the people who are on LinkedIn, premium is a waste of money. Okay? I was using free up until recently, and the only reason I switched to premium is because of the search filters that I get when you are premium, which are, for instance, I am looking for company size when I'm looking for the CEOs that I'm looking to connect with, and I can only get that through the premium, and that is worth it for me because it saves me a ton of time. Most of the features that you get with a premium, most people are not using it. They're a waste of their money. Give me the money instead of LinkedIn. I'll give you a lot more value than they will. I can assure you. Now, for the people who do need it, there's some people who do need it, and it's very valuable. But most of the features are not that useful. The number one people tell, oh, it's the in-mail. You can connect with anybody. An in-mail to a person that you don't know, it's a cold call. Okay, and there's ways around it. I can connect with anybody on LinkedIn without having in-mail, because I know what I'm doing and I know how to get around doing that. So in answer to your question, it depends, but for most people the answer is no. Most people are not using the basic anyway, so why go to the premium? Yes?
So how do you get around that?
Huh? What's that?
How do you get around that? So if you want to, if you're not going to, because I don't do premium.
Groups are a great way to get around that, and then using your connections. Leveraging groups is the way to do that, and I can talk to you more offline. Yes?
I'm one of the people that don't have an account presently, but
But you will, right?
Yes, I'm going to have one out.
Good. When?
Currently, I get
Just
a
kidding.
lot of invites or say, this person would like to connect with me, and I'm thinking, how can you connect with me when I don't have an account?
They can't. You have to create an account first.
So they can send me an invitation.
Yeah, they can send an invitation to join LinkedIn, and that's somebody they uploaded their Outlook, their Gmail account. You were in there, and you got the formal invitation from somebody. Just did that.
Because my concern is that if there's, 2 or 3 people out there with the same name in mind, how do I make myself different than that person that's out there, other than just...
Well, for one thing, you won't be able to create the same username as they will. There's different things. But you know what? You're right. But LinkedIn won't allow you to create the same username as somebody else. And there's tactics that you can use to differentiate yourself from doing that. All right, I'm almost out of time, so those of you who still have questions, let me tell you a little bit about what I have to offer you in case you'd like to take advantage. And this is really what I believe it's a win-win situation that we have if you take me up on this. If you're serious about learning how to use LinkedIn, I can assure you that I can help you do that, and I'll save you a ton of time if you do that. Okay, I'm going to ask you to let me become your LinkedIn advisor, and I have a very affordable program that I put together where we'll give you access to both my knowledge and my connections. What it consists of is these short videos. They're 6 to 10 minutes long, and they walk you through the A through Z of LinkedIn, starting out from the most important thing, which is your profile, moving all the way to some of the advanced things like how to use groups, recommendations, etc. It will give you a roadmap, a strategy, and more importantly, you'll have access to me whenever you want to. It's like I'm on retainer to you. You can email me, you can call me, I'm locally, and I do respond to all the requests. Each video that I have is Gene approved. What does that mean? Jean is a lady who used to work for me in another company that I have. She's practically computer illiterate. All right, and I say, Jean, would you mind testing this for me? Because if you can use it, anybody else can. We have that kind of relationship. And Jean actually used it, and she said to me, Rick, you can let your clients know that these are Jean approved. So they are Jean approved. So if that's your concern, I'm not very good with computers, they're Jean approved, and you'll be able to do that. All right, they're only 6 to 10 minutes long, and it's like having me sitting next to you. I go through, again, there's 18 different pieces, 18 modules. You're going to get a sheet with all of these, by the way. And here's what I'm going to offer to you. I normally charge $49 a month to do that. I'm making a special offer today at the presentation where you'll get that for $39 a month, which is a 20% discount. And it's a month-to-month thing. You're not under any long-term commitment. I recommend if you stay with me that you stay for about 6 to 9 months. You'll get about 60 to 70% of what I'm going to teach you, and that should be sufficient for most people to be able to do that, but you're not committed to do that. And one extra little bonus I'm going to throw in is that if you take me up on that while you're here today before you leave, I'm going to throw in a bonus where I'll do a profile review for you. Okay? So you'll be handed some sheets. You can fill those out, and if you have any questions or whatever, be sure you let me know. I invite all of you to connect with me on LinkedIn, Rick Itzkowicz. There's not that many of them. You start typing ITZ, I'm going to come up. All right, and by the way, say that you have done business with me, and then you will not have to enter my email address. If you say that you don't know me or whatever it is, then you will have to. But if you have done business with me, just mention that you were at the MSEL breakfast, and I can go ahead and just connect you. And you'll see some of you already sent me invitations to connect prior to today. Were there any of you in the audience who actually did that? A few people did. And you notice that I responded to you. And that's one of the things you'll want to do when people actually accept your invitation, when you invite them, you accept them. It's a conversation. It's not a monologue. Send something that says thank you at the very least. You'll get to see what it is that I do. I hope that you have found this useful and helpful. I'll be around if you have any questions, but I'm going to turn this over back to Christina. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.